All right, good morning, folks. I want to first apologize to you for the insanity that has created the delays. If you if you knew what was going on behind the scenes, you'd probably laugh a little bit because it is a bit of a funny situation. But praise God, we are here. I am excited because we are going to go over everything Iran today and what surrounds it. Now, I want everybody to know this because this is really important. I know that I am not talking to my normal audience when I say this, okay? I want to make myself clear. This is not me addressing those of you that watch me day in and day out. This is me addressing a few people, but it is worthwhile mentioning because when I mention things like this, it helps us to better set our expectations for what we are doing, okay? Let me make myself clear with something. I am not the guy who is going to bring you breaking news. I have never been a breaking news person. If there's something that happens in the media or something that we find out that is breaking and is super critical, in my opinion, to bring to the table, then of course I'm going to bring it to the table. But let me just explain my perspective on this because this is really important. I am not going to bring you news unless for whatever reason I know that I can tie a biblical value to it. And not only will I bring you news the moment I see it or hear it, not only will I not do that, I will bring it only when I know that I have researched what I'm looking at and that I can give you valuable insight to understand what to do with it. Now, I'm going to make this argument because I think this is important. I believe that you could have all the breaking news in the world and you will not understand what's really going on. And so knowing everything won't do you any good. I see this happening all the time. I know lots of people that are really, really, really good at bringing in geopolitical insight, right? There's lots of guys that I know that are good for that. You could go to them and you can get good geopolitical insight. But what you won't get is you won't get a sensational breaking news type of mindset. Now, I know lots of guys that will give you all the breaking news in the world. Lots of really just right off the cuff breaking news. Half the time it's good, half the time it isn't. But what they won't be able to do is they won't be able to connect the dots of what they're actually seeing. And my hope and my prayer is that I will give you the news that is necessary to help you connect the dots that are critically important to what you're actually seeing right now. And I actually believe in my heart of heart that some of the things we are watching, if analyzed correctly, will completely open your eyes to see what is actually happening in the Middle East. This is such a critical point, and I want you guys to get this, okay? I want you guys to understand this because what we're looking at right now is unprecedented. What we are seeing is absolutely historic. And when I talk about unprecedented and historic, I'm not even talking about the helicopter crash that killed some very evil people. I'm actually talking about the geopolitics that surround what this helicopter crash is likely going to bring, what it has already brought, and what we're beginning to see formulate in the Middle East. So all of these things are critical. All of these things are valuable, and all of these things are really, really important for us to be able to see, to know, to understand, to recognize, to discern through, to develop, to make ourselves aware of it. Now, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to give you some news stories that are breaking right now that are critical to the subject matter that we are talking about. And I'm even going to do some analysis on what happens and what type of things we should actually be thinking about as a result of what has taken place and what's going on. Because if you don't understand the internal politics of Iran, which it can be a very complicated thing to understand, you're going to have a very difficult time really understanding or anticipating or building some kind of an anticipatory mechanism to develop an awareness of what is actually coming. So my hope is that I am going to be able to do this for you. My hope and my prayer is that I'm going to bring you to a place where you can anticipate and know and understand what is happening right now in the Middle East and where it's going to eventually go. And of course, we will talk about some of these very, very, very important issues relative to what we're looking at right now. So, Brad, you are the first person. And by the way, for those of you on the last live show that super chatted, you all are amazing. Brad and Linda and Jackie and Ibez and Dolores and Foy and Mike Sanchez. Thank you, Brad Brunn. You say with flashbangs, poll numbers dropping faster than an Iranian helicopter, one must wonder if they have Stacey Abrams working overtime. I can't. Why are you giving me comments that if I read are going to get me kicked off of YouTube? Oh, Brad, I love you. Sherry, thank you. Both of you are awesome. You guys are all a blessing. All right, let's get into this because we have some really important things to go over. All right. For those of you who might not be aware of everything that has happened in Iran, let me just kind of give you a very quick bird's eye view of what has taken place. Sunday, we know that a helicopter, which was traveling, by the way, with two other helicopters somewhere from Azerbaijan, okay, was on its way back into Iran, and one of those helicopters was carrying two people very critical to the narrative that we're having a discussion concerning right now. One was Ebrahim Raisi, who is the president or was the president of Iran. The other one is a person by the name of Amir Abdullahian. He is was the foreign minister. And we have a lot to talk about with respect to both of these folks. There is much to be said, and we need to understand what's going on. Now, at some point, what I will be doing is I will be showing you Abdullahian speaking, because I think it is important to understand where he came from and what he was actually doing. He was indeed a terrorist. He was the head of the IRGC. For those of you that don't know, the IRGC is in essence the epitome of Iran's terror base in many respects. I'm not going to get into all of the ins and the outs of it because I understand just how easy some of this stuff can get, bent, especially when it's not understood. But we need to talk about what's happened and what's going on and what's in front of us in the current moment. And we're going to do all of that because I think there is a lot to be said concerning this. Now, with this said, these two key people have died. Now, that's important to understand because when you recognize what has happened, you realize that the full implications, the full effects of what happens next are pretty significant. For those of you that do not know, Iran is at the core and the very base of terrorist activity pretty much all throughout the Middle Eastern region. As a matter of fact, the largest terror state in existence is undoubtedly the state of Iran. Okay? We need to know that because if we don't know it and we don't spend time understanding it or recognizing it, we create for ourselves already a channel to not understand what's happening. Okay? So we need to know what we're dealing with here, and what we're dealing with is we are dealing with a terrorist state. Okay? Now, with that said, I want us all to understand some critical facts regarding all of this. And I also want us to understand how important it is to not forget, that this game is not over. When we understand what the Bible says concerning what's going to happen, the things that are going on, understand it's crazy. So let's go back to Ebrahim Raisi. Let's go back to Abdullahian. These are both very evil people. The foreign minister, by the way, for those of you that don't know, was in essence the real head of the IRGC. Everybody needs to know that. They will tell you no, the media will tell you no. The reality was he was the most influential man in the IRGC, and the person that's actually taking his place, this is very, very interesting what's going to happen there, and we're going to get into what that means and what's taking place next. So they boarded on a helicopter that was pretty old. I don't even understand why they would get on this Huey-type helicopter. I believe it was a Bell 212. I'd have to go back and look at the exact model number, but it was a 200 series Bell helicopter. Okay? Not very well maintained, filled with all kinds of problems, okay? Problems that they were aware of. And quite frankly, I'm not even going to get into the theory world of what happened and what took place. There's a lot of people that say that there were multiple different people groups that could have done this. The first set of eyes obviously is on Israel. Some people say no, it was none of that. It was just simple weather, and it probably was. We just don't know. There's another idea that says that this was potentially done by Khomeini's son, because Khomeini was extraordinarily close to Raisi, and Raisi was viewed as the person that would take over for Khomeini, and Khomeini in his mid-80s is not doing well physically. So there's a whole bunch of problems that this whole gap is going to produce, and it's going to produce these problems in ways that a lot of people cannot possibly begin to understand, because there's a lot of people, a lot of things we still don't know. Like, here's an example. You want an update on this, which, by the way, I'm releasing a video that specifically talks about this. I believe this is going to be on Sunday or Monday. I don't remember. But this death has revealed that there were secret talks taking place. This is no joke, folks, between the United States of America and Iran. Listen to me. Listen to me when I say this. Secret talks between the United States and Iran. Now, what are the purpose of the talks? The implosion of the JCPOA? No. The problem with nuclear facilities? No. Release some of our hostages? No. The purpose of the secret meeting between the United States of America and Iran, ready for this, folks? Listen to this. This is crazy. Okay? Ready? The purpose was to discuss how to undermine, yes, folks, that's the word, undermine the position of the Prime Minister of Israel. Part of their discussion was removing Netanyahu out of office, because the position of this current regime, who is evil and dark, and yes, satanically inspired, is to see regime change in Israel. Not regime change in Gaza, not regime change with the Palestinian Authority, not regime change in Iran, not regime change in Syria, which, by the way, there's an interesting story there that we're going to go over. Not regime change in Iraq. No. Regime change in the heart of Israel while Israel is at war. By the way, that's one of the discussions. Another thing that they were discussing, are you ready for this? Get this. Another thing that they were discussing, by the way, the foreign minister of Iran is involved in these conversations. That's no joke. No joke. Which, by the way, the deputy foreign minister, who worked, of course, for the foreign minister, Abdullahian, his name is Baghari Khani, or Khani. And if you don't know who Baghari Khani is, he is going to be a person that will be as brutal and as ruthless as the man he worked for. But the difference between him and the man that he worked for is he has a much more cozy relationship with the United States of America. No joke, folks. Why? Because Brett McGurk, who is the foreign policy advisor in the Biden regime, has developed an extremely close relationship with Khani. I'm not joking, folks. So if you think we are in a really, really bad place as a country, the United States of America, we're in a far worse place than most people ever thought. Because not only are we colluding with Iran, and yes, we are colluding with Iran to destroy the Knesset, literally, cause the government of Israel to collapse, but we're doing it during a time of war. We're doing it in a time where in Gaza, there are 4 American hostages that are still unaccounted for and are being controlled by a government that is directly influenced by Iran. Wait, let me get this straight, just so everybody understands. Iran is paying and funding Hamas. Iran is paying and funding Hezbollah. Iran is funding and paying virtually every single terrorist activity that is happening in the region. Yet the United States of America is entering into talks. Has been, not entering, has entered into talks, secret talks, confidential talks, talks that are not allowed for anybody to understand or know, with the deputy foreign minister, having a conversation with terrorists about how to dismantle our only ally in the region and actually give way to terrorist activity so that what? So that you can get a few votes out of Michigan? So that you can develop a few friends? Ladies and gentlemen, we have Obama reincarnated. Literally, Obama reincarnated through this clown. Right? And folks, I don't know how many times I've said this. I've said it again and again and again and again and again. We saw the interview where Barack Obama said if he could have it his way, he would sit in some room where nobody knew where he was and he would just speak into the ear of whoever was a president. And it would be perfect for him. He would love to do that. Okay? We know this. By the way, it's interesting. This news story that I'm telling you about has already been confirmed in mainstream media. But you want to know why you haven't heard about it, why you're not seeing it? Because no one wants to talk about it. Why? Because it doesn't meet their agenda. It doesn't come even close to meeting their agenda. By the way, for those of you that don't know, the secret talks that the United States has been entering into with Iran have been in Oman. Yes, the southern portion of the Arabian Peninsula, directly east of Yemen. So let's get this straight. Saudi Arabia, who is also our ally in the region, who struggles immensely with the problems that the Yemeni Houthis are creating, who are controlled by Iran, and Iran is not friendly towards Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia officially is friendly with everybody, but Iran and Saudi Arabia are not friends. The Saudi Arabians are Sunni, the Iranians are Shiites. Their ideals are completely different from one another. They think completely differently. And even their flavor of Islam is completely broken. Their idea of Islamic, what you would call eschatology, is completely different. Do you know how twisted the Iranians are? The Iranians, who are driven by Shiite Islamic behavior, actually believe that Jesus will come back with a group of specific, very elite people to kill all Christians and Jews. Folks, that's not a joke. I'm telling you, that's their belief. So everything they do is driving home the same point. Everything that's going on is driving home the same point. By the way, one of the other stories that we're going to go over is another one that is just absolutely crazy. It's significant. And it's one of a leader, and I'm not joking, of Iran, one of the lawmakers of Iran, actually saying, reiterating something he'd already said, that they have the ability to develop and create a nuclear weapon. They can do it extraordinarily quickly. When I say extraordinarily quickly, within days. Actually admit it. And the United States is doing what about it? The United States is doing nothing about it, folks. Why? Because they're engaging. Folks, they're engaging in secret talks with Iran. Can I tell you exactly what they're saying? The talks took place in Muscat. We know that, right? Okay? It hosted a series of meetings between Tehran and Washington and continues to host a series of meetings. And by the way, they first entered into a round of discussions to get rid of or remove Netanyahu from his spot in January of this year, to undermine the Israeli government. They went on and continued to have discussions recently until the president died and the foreign minister died. And when that happened, then all of this stuff got blown out, and we all know what happened, and it kind of came out and was released and came into play. By the way, Axios is one of the people that's actually reporting this. It's funny how you talk about the fact that Iran even said, Bagheri Khari, actually Yarkani. I always conflate him with somebody else. Bagheri Khani said the same exact thing. Talks have been going well, meaning Iran is happy with the results of what they've been doing with the United States of America. It's absolutely crazy. Here are the subjects. These are the official subjects. Let me read this to you. The talks focused on 3 subjects: a shared desire for a change in government in Israel, ending Israel's war on Gaza. How do you think they want to end Israel's war on Gaza, by the way? Notice they didn't say ending the war that Gaza initiated with Israel. Notice they didn't say removing Hamas from the area. Notice they didn't say any of those things. The goal here, their second goal, is ending Israel's war in Gaza. Kind of funny how that works. The third thing, preventing the conflict from spreading elsewhere in the region, meaning shutting up people who have a dissenting voice regarding the decisions of these terrorist organizations so that they are, in essence, rendered ineffective. It's absolutely crazy. The thing that just shocks me with this is Iran launched the largest scale attack in the history of the Middle East in the last 70 years, 80 years, whatever it might be. And it almost seems as though they didn't even get slapped on the wrist. Think about that for a second. So what does this mean? Okay, we're going to get into the implications of this. The implications of this are obvious. I release a video on this later on in the week that you guys will really appreciate. I believe that video ends up getting released on Sunday, either Sunday or Monday. I'm also releasing a video on something that happened in Saudi Arabia that should also get your attention. That's pretty incredible, related to Japan and the G7. That's a very, very important story as well. But let's talk about what the death of Raisi really means. Let's understand what takes place. Because there's a transition that is already underway that may open up the door for Iran to finish their nuclear weapons. I want to make myself very, very clear here, okay? We have a problem that extends far beyond what most people understand and know could potentially happen. There are people that are standing, waiting in the shadows to prove a point that they can be stronger and greater than Raisi. There's an internal conflict going on with Khomeini right now related to his son who wants to take power. I don't know that Khomeini is completely in objection to that. I do know that Khomeini was very, very close to Raisi. And I also know that Raisi was very much, very, 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 very much on the track to becoming the new supreme leader. But it means a lot of very, very interesting things. I want to do this because this will help us to analyze what's going on. And by the way, we still have not spoken about, which we will, we still have not spoken about Hezbollah. We still have not spoken about the effects that this is going to have on the Houthis. We still have not spoken about the effects that this is going to have on Hamas. They're going to have lots of effects. And there are some things that we're going to talk about with respect to all of those things that hopefully will be able to give you some deeper insight as into what's going on. Because there are some really, really, really interesting things that are actually happening here that I want you guys to be made aware of. Because, again, it's, look, well, let's just get into this, and then we'll get into all the others in just a second. So here we go. I think the first thing that we're going to do, let me make sure I have this here. I want to make sure I have this available. Let me see here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I do have it. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I had it before I put anything out. So we're gonna do this. Yeah, is that what we have? It is. Okay, perfect. There is an article that was released in Politico that I want to read to you that is going to help us create a launching pad for some of the insight that you're not going to get anywhere else, that I want you to be able to see and understand because it is very, very important. Okay? All right. Let's get into this. The article starts, by the way, the name of the article is What the Death of Iran's President Really Means. It says this: before he managed to best a weak field in a heavily orchestrated, that's really, really funny. Okay, this is a bad typo. That's a funny part about something like that. I didn't even recognize the typo because I read by it so fast. Okay. Let's just, I'm going to skip the first sentence because it's not going to make sense, okay? But it's talking about Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi's claim to fame, or infamy, as the case may be, was his role in sending, watch this, folks, 5,000 political prisoners to their deaths. That mass murder in 1988 was part of a larger campaign by Iran's theocratic state to intimidate its increasingly frustrated citizenry in preparation for the end of an 8-year war with Iraq in the death of the revolution's founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Which, by the way, the pronunciations of those last names are slightly different. The original founder of the revolution versus the other one, the pronunciations are slightly different. I always pronounce them the same because most people, when they hear me pronounce it slightly differently, they won't know what I'm referencing. So I just tend to pronounce them the same. Anyway, Raisi's many victims might find satisfaction in his death, but the repressive regime he leaves behind will outlive him. Okay, remember that last sentence. I'm going to read that last sentence to you, right? The repressive regime he leaves behind will outlive him. Look what it goes on to say. It is perhaps fitting that Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash on Sunday at 63, leaves behind another war that the regime helped to fuel and another looming leadership transition. Like the executions he fast-tracked in the revolution's early decades, Raisi's elevation was intended to sustain the revolutionary enterprise through the much-anticipated secession of its current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Okay, that's actually how you would actually pronounce it. I still always say Khomeini. Raisi's unexpected loss will force the aging scions of Iran's theocracy to improve at a precarious moment at home and around the region. It's another spelling error. To improvise at a precarious moment at home and around the region. How they navigate this challenge will prove decisive for the future of Iran and the broader Middle East. Okay, so let me explain to you what that means, okay, and what they're actually implying when they say that, okay? The infrastructure that was created by Khomeini, the original Khomeini, was a strong one. It graduated substantially after the war that was being spoken of in this article, and the current supreme leader is not only doing well in maintaining the enterprise, I'm going to use that term very loosely and actually somewhat sarcastically, he is actually going so far as to want to use the opportunity of having Raisi by his side and Abdullahian to further the position of Iran in the eyes of certain so-called or potential allies to strengthen their position of tyranny and terrorism, okay? Khomeini has always had a desire to never be the front face of Iran, which is why he never was, but certainly the supreme ruler of Iran, and through the front-facing people that he has selected, he has done a relatively good job getting people to understand and know and recognize what is happening and what's before them. I want everybody to know and to understand this. The current president of Iran, although is going to be brutal, like Raisi was, certainly did not have the curb appeal that Raisi had, for lack of a better term, as you initially see him, talk to him. When you look at Raisi, Raisi looks like a sweet old man that means no harm to anybody, who could be anybody's grandpa. He's completely the opposite. He's a dark, evil, demonic individual who now is experiencing the judgment for the behavior that he gave himself to his whole life. But what we need to understand is that Raisi was so valuable to the Ayatollah because he could be the type of person that could stand in that dynasty and continue to be as strong as the previous Ayatollahs and keep the oppressive thumb of that regime on the hand of Iran. That would mean that the empire of terror would grow. That would mean that the use of proxies would continue to grow. That would mean that organizations like Hezbollah or Hamas or even the PA in some respects, Palestinian Authority, or the Houthis or many other organizations find themselves, Al-Quds, all of these organizations will find themselves in a place of having great centralized organization and support from Iran. And Iran continues to maintain a culture of fear and a massive culture of hatred because that's what it's good at doing. Raisi was a perfect candidate to be the person to step in because he not only had the strength to be that brutal type of individual, the nature of his activity was driven by idealism. This was not a man who said, well, I'm doing this because I just want to climb the ladder. Like, no guy wakes up and says, I'm going to kill hundreds of thousands of people just because I want to climb a ladder. No, he actually believes the nonsense that he continues to represent. He actually believes that it is a thing that honors what he calls God, Allah, by the murder of all these innocent people. And he is darker than darker gets. Khomeini loves a man like him because that man, and this is really, really important, right? That man is so deeply embedded within the idealism that drove this original revolution that it was a win-win situation for Khomeini. So if I can get Khomeini to move on, and I'm the person who wants the best for what I see in this regime, my ideal candidate is going to be Raisi. By the way, Khomeini and Raisi were very, very close. There was no tension between them. They were both men that were driven by strict Islamic idealism, specifically as Shiites. They walk in the vein of a communist way of thinking, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, and one of these days I'm going to help you make this connection. We're actually going to do a video where we talk about this. There's a direct link between communism and Islam. They both work together hand in hand. They both function the same way. They both work together. They both think the same way. They act the same way. They feed one another, which is why the PLO was so critical to Russia in the time that Yasser Arafat was created by him. Yasser Arafat, by the way, by the KGB, Yasser Arafat was a complete fraud. He was a fake. He's an Egyptian. Palestinians, by the way, most Palestinians come from other countries. There's no such thing as a, born true Palestinian, if that makes any kind of sense. As a matter of fact, the first Palestinians ever in the region were actually Jews because they were called Palestinians by the Roman government that mocked them. It's very true. It's really, really important. So they named the land Palestina out of mockery of the Jews that were living in the land because Palestina was the word for their ancient enemy, the Philistines. So they named it the land of the Philistines, and the first people that were referred to as Palestinians were actually Jews. So when you talk about the first Palestinians in the land, they were the first Palestinians in the land. They were the Jews. But that's how the lies work. I love that name, Boris Gump. Oh, God bless you, bro. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, but think about what's happening here. The lies continue. By the way, here's something you should probably know. Top 10 richest people in the world. Khomeini is probably within the top 3 now. Not even top 10. You know how much Khomeini they believe is actually worth? They believe he's worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 billion. Billion, folks. Billion, not million. $200 billion. Okay, we'll leave that alone. We'll get back to that in just a second. But this is like critical. This is like really, really important for us to understand. So with Raisi being dead, now there's a problem for Khomeini. Khomeini is on his way out. He's about to die. People think he's struggling with cancer. That may be very well true. And a lot of people tell me, well, James, this is so amazing because this is Iran's opportunity to actually take over a new revolution and it go back to the way it used to be prior to 1979. Like, this is the real opportunity. No, it's not. You're not going to go back to Shah territory. And I'll tell you why you're not going to go back to Shah territory. You're not going to go back to Shah territory because you don't have a strong government in the United States of America that will support that regime change. There are a lot of governments around us that will support that regime change. Israel will support that regime change. Saudi Arabia will support the regime change. Lots of other people will support the regime change. But guess who won't support it? The United States of America under the leadership of Joe Biden. His regime will never support regime change. Not in Iran. How do we know that? They're having secret talks, folks. The United States of America is having secret talks with Iran while Israel is in war. Subject matter is the removal of Netanyahu and the undermining of the war effort. Don't anybody ever tell me that Joe Biden is not anti-Semitic. Don't anybody ever tell me that him or his handlers do not have the intent to actually destroy Jewish lives. It's a complete farce. It's a complete lie. I just can't emphasize enough, you guys, how absolutely backwards this nonsense is. Look what this article goes on to say, because it's going to bring up some really important points. The ascension of Raisi to the regime's second highest office was not a function of any discernible charisma or political skill, but rather an acknowledgement that he possessed the qualities most valuable for late-stage autocracy. Mindless loyalty to the ruling system, a track record of unhesitating brutality, and deep integration within the religious, familiar, and security networks that underpin the state. In this sense, he was a reliable functionary of the clerical state, a symptom, not the cause of its domestic repression and regional aggression. Okay, the symptom, not the cause of such domestic repression and regional aggression, I think is an accurate statement. So what is the root cause? Well, we know what the root cause is. The root cause is Islam. The root cause is the flavor of Islam that they give themselves to. Shiite Islamic theology. I mentioned this before. These people are idealistic people, right? I say this all the time. When we used to talk about Marxism and we used to talk about communism a lot, I was never worried about the economic Marxists. Because economic Marxists change their minds pretty quickly. I'm more worried about cultural Marxists. I'm more worried about the idealists that toy around with a theory that they have no idea what it actually means, because the idealism itself that they give themselves to is the very foundation that they place their reckless behavior on, and it continues to drive them in a way where they feel like they're righteous and there's nothing that can stop them. Raisi was not a dangerous man because of his political maneuverings. He wasn't a dangerous man because of his ability to be remarkably articulate, which, by the way, he was a very articulate man. Raisi was dangerous because of the idealism that drove what he did. That's what made him dangerous. He was not a true political operative. He didn't care about the politics that drove the decisions that he made. You don't concern yourself with politics if, as a leader, you kill 5,000 people just for speaking up against you. It's really important that we understand this. So look at what the Observer in Politico says. For that reason, his death is not likely to precipitate meaningful changes in Iranian policies. What may have changed is the considerable appetite. Look at what he says here. The considerable appetite risk that Tehran has demonstrated over the past several years, from blindly enforcing religious structures in their rebellious constituents to nearly going to war with Israel, the regime seems to disregard its own political interests. Okay, here's the thing that I got to get into people's head, including the writer of this article, because it's very difficult to get people to understand this. There is no political prowess involved in the decision-making that Iran is doing. I don't even like the idea that people use terminology like risk-averse or fearful of risk or embracing risk. The whole idea of what Iran is doing has nothing to do with being risky. Iran doesn't have an appetite to do risky things. Iran stands under the function of its idolatrous idealism that drives it to do what it does. When a guy puts on a vest that's explosive and detonates it while saying Allahu Akbar, Ya la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, they're not saying it because of some weird political hope that they have. They're not standing and go, revolution, revolution, we want a better life. No, they don't care about a better life. These are the people that train their children to kill themselves while killing other people. These are people that make it a part of their embedded culture to take joy in murdering Jews. These are people who do not respond to the fear of what may happen that is negative because they are being driven by an idealistic state that teaches them that the whole apex of what they do is the ushering in of a reward that they get that isn't even in the life that they're in. I can guarantee you this right now. Raisi and Abdullayan are not experiencing 72 virgins. I can tell you that right now. They're screaming. I can tell you that. They're not getting any of that stuff. But the idealism that drives their way of thinking is what's actually scary. So look what it goes on to say. It says, by the way, I'm telling you this right now, like I want to make sure, do not let people get you to think that Iran is just particularly risky for whatever reason. It just doesn't work that way. Okay? Wiggle Watcher, thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you for your generosity. This is being driven by idealism. Look what it goes on to say. This is really, really important that we understand this, okay? It goes on to say this, with many aging leaders. Oh, actually, let me go back to this sentence that I missed. Iran's senior leadership necessarily will find itself more consumed by the task of ensuring a smooth transition to a new president amidst voter apathy and a recent history of internal unrest. However, Khomeini and his security services will be acutely aware of the risk inherent in any perception of vulnerability, both in terms of their external posture as well as internal politics. By the way, this is why they'll never admit, even if Israel did it, that Israel did it. Won't happen. As a result, we should expect a skittish, reactive Iran that may be more dangerous if it perceives itself on the defensive. Okay, see, I don't agree with that. He says we should be expecting a more skittish, a more reactive Iran that may be more dangerous if it perceives itself on the defensive, kind of like a cat that gets back in the corner and realizes it's about to die, so it has no other alternative than to go, Pew! No, sorry, doesn't work that way. Iran is driven by such a high level of idealism that the nefarious mechanism of organization that they deploy is so substantial that there is calculation in what they do and not just some simple backdoor I'm panicking. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a little bit of panicking going on right now because they did not anticipate the death of Raisi. And they certainly did not anticipate the death of Abdullayan. These are the two most powerful people in Iran next to Khomeini. You've got Khomeini, you've got Raisi in second place, and third place, you have the foreign minister, Abdullayan. So what shook them is the loss of those two guys. But understand there is a mechanism of great intentionality that exists within the form of calculation that they deploy that cannot be ignored. These are people that thought through and continue to think through every single evil, wicked thing that they do, and they do not apologize for it. So the moment you understand that will be the very moment that you recognize there's a lot more at stake here. By the way, I will say this. The mechanism of calculation that they deploy and the nefarious accompaniment that oftentimes surrounds the encapsulation of all that they do literally is centered around the fact that the father of lies inspires them. That it's the devil himself that puts all of this together, right? I have read this to you on so many occasions, I have forgotten. I have forgotten how many times I've read this to you. But this is what the Quran says in 354. I'll read it to you clearly in Arabic. وَمَكْرُ وَمَكْرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرَ الْمَكَرِينَ. They deceived, so Allah deceived. Why? Because Allah is the chief of deceivers. That's what it says in the Quran. So deception is the primary mechanism that drives how Iran functions. And when it does function, it functions under the mechanism of idealism or the accelerant of idealism. And it creates a significant amount of turmoil in the minds of people that don't understand how that's driven. Can I give you an example of what that looks like? Because some people might listen to what I just said and think that it's just a whole bunch of empty words that don't make sense, right? Like, James, come on, you just said a whole bunch of stuff that's nonsense to me. Okay, I can respect that. Can I give you an example of what that looks like? 9/11. Should we talk about 9/11? Okay. Here's the thing that shocked everybody about 9/11. Okay? What happened in the specific context in which it happened shocked people to no avail. We had certain events that have taken place over the years that shocked people. Because when those events took place, it didn't make sense to us. Things didn't happen that way traditionally, and so we couldn't process it any other way. And as a result, lots of lives were lost. Okay, can I give you the example of this? Columbine. We'll go to 9/11 in just a second. But how about we talk about Columbine for a second? When you tear apart the mechanics of Columbine, there were certain things that did not exist prior to Columbine that now exist. If you don't know the Columbine story, it's a tragic story. It's teenagers killing a whole generation of kids in a school. If I remember correctly, Dale, remember, you can send me the name of both of those boys. I think it was 2 boys involved in Columbine. I don't exactly remember. I shouldn't remember it. I was in some of those briefings afterwards as a chaplain. I was in some of those federal briefings, believe it or not. One in Colorado. I can't believe I don't even remember that. Oh, Did, thank you so much. Either way, I think one of them was Dylan. I don't remember. Anyway, prior to Columbine, this is how law enforcement reacted to situations where men came in with guns intending to kill people. If somebody had a gun and they went into a building and the building was heavily populated, law enforcement oftentimes set up a perimeter, and then they held the perimeter and then created some type of a tool that would be deployed to start a conversation for some type of negotiation. Because the mentality prior to Columbine was, if a guy is going in, 12th grade student is what Dale's telling me. If a guy is going in to actually harm somebody and take hostages, he's taking hostages because he has a demand. And prior to Columbine, that was typically the case, right? Columbine happens, and there's no rhyme to the reason. It doesn't even make sense. You've got 2 12th grade students, Eric and Dylan. They walk in armed. What a lot of people don't know about Columbine, by the way, is they planted all kinds of explosives that never went off. They had put all kinds of booby traps throughout that school that no one even knew that they did. It came out much later. There's a lot of things that they didn't know about Columbine that were very serious, very real things that had happened. But prior to Columbine, can I just remind you of something? Prior to Columbine, we set up containments because we did not ever foresee a situation where somebody would just go into a room and just start killing people. After Columbine, we started doing a different type of training. Matter of fact, we do that training here at Calvary Chapel, Signal Hill. Okay? It's called active shooter training. What does it mean? After Columbine, we learned this. We learned that when somebody is actively shooting in a building, law enforcement is no longer expected. By the way, the Hollywood shootout did this. There were a lot of different shootouts that took place that caused us to think differently. The mindset is no longer setting up a containment and waiting for demands. The mindset is now when there's active shooting taking place, you run in the building, you engage a suspect, even if there is loss of life, because by doing so quickly, you actually will mitigate the loss of life and potentially change some outcomes. The Lakewood Church, that happened. There were other places where people came in and actively engaged an active shooter, and it saved a lot of people's lives. But prior to Columbine, we didn't think that way. I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. So after Columbine, we were all thinking about active shooter situations. By the way, if somebody is watching me right now from Israel, they're going to understand what I'm saying immediately. This will make perfect sense to them, which I think we do have some people from Israel. As a matter of fact, I actually think that Oded is watching in Israel. So let's go to 9/11. 9/11 is an interesting scenario because here's the thing that we did not anticipate in 9/11. Matter of fact, they retrained the air marshals. Law enforcement saw things a completely different way. Military saw things a completely different way. The world completely changed in how it dealt with things because prior to 9/11, United States of America could never contemplate a situation where somebody was so tied to their ideal that their life would no longer be valuable to them and that they would literally kill themselves if it meant they could kill so many other people. Homicide bombing to us, everybody called it suicide bombing, but homicide bombing to us was like, it happens, but we're never going to be affected by it. Then 9/11 takes place. And when 9/11 takes place, we've got these very well-trained men, serious people. These people are no joke. They're like outright tacticians. They know exactly what they're doing. They're not messing around. They're not playing games. They're not messing up. They know exactly what they're doing. They are so willing to be given to the cause that is encapsulated by the idealism that they believe. And they don't care about their lives being taken. It used to be prior to 9/11, you could walk up to somebody if you were a police officer, and the duress that you created by holding them at gunpoint was more than enough to be able to get compliance out of them. In other words, you could go up to somebody and you could say, get your hands up right now or I'll shoot. And that person would put their hands up and they would comply because they didn't want to get shot. Right? We learned after 9/11, if you go up to a Muslim who is driven by the ideals that the Quran teaches them to hate and destroy Jewish lives, you're never going to be able to stop them by saying, get your hands up while you're holding them at gunpoint. They're going to laugh at you. And while they're laughing at you, they're going to say, Allahu Akbar. And then what they're going to end up doing is initiating the weapon that they know will take their lives, because the idealism that drives them to do what they do causes them to have no respect for life. So when you start talking about the idea that these people are going to be more dangerous if they perceive itself on the defensive, let me explain something to you. There is no such thing as defensive with Iran. Iran will take any tool given to them at any moment for any reason, and they will deploy it nefariously because they are not driven by an engine that causes them to be defensive. Like we learned with the 9/11 terrorists. You point a gun at somebody who doesn't care about their life because they're about to take their own life anyway, you're not going to get compliance out of them. There will be no defensive reaction with somebody who has that. When your idealism is fueled by the teachings of the Quran and you believe that lie, hook, line, and sinker, you're going to do whatever that idealism has taught you to do. You're going to do whatever the Quran has lied to you about. You're not going to be on the defensive for anything because you don't care. You don't want to be on the defensive. And if you ever do function defensively, the only reason why you will seek to evade or be defensive in the context that these trained terrorists are in is only so that they could accomplish or finish the purpose or the mission. So the idea that the writer here is saying this tells me that there's a fundamental misappropriation of their cultural analysis to be able to come to that type of conclusion. But he still is very insightful in what he writes. Look what he goes on to say. He says, as with many aging leaders, Khomeini is facing his own generational dilemmas. He has been aggressive in purging his peers and the old establishment figures such as former President Hassan Rouhani, which, by the way, that's an interesting story about Hassan Rouhani. He had a heart attack, and a lot of people actually think that he was actually executed. He was or assassinated. Interesting story with Rouhani. Former Speaker of the Parliament, Ali Rouhani. These men were at times prone to question his judgment and even challenge his decrees. They were, after all, responsible for transacting an arms control agreement with the perfidious Americans that yielded little in terms of economic dividends. And then former President Donald Trump's team simply abrogated the accord and reimposed all sanctions, and with that, Washington helped to collapse the center of Iranian politics. Okay, let me rephrase his sentence. I'm going to read this. And with that, Washington helped to collapse the center of Iranian politics. Can I change that sentence? And with that, Washington helped to collapse the center of Iranian diplomacy, not politics. Look, substitute the word politics in context with Iran to idealism. You're never going to subrogate it. You're never going to take the idealism that Iran has given itself to and, in essence, remove it. So what Washington did was help to collapse the center of Iranian, for lack of a better term, I mean, I don't even know if I can even call it that. I don't even know if I could call it diplomatic efforts. But what little diplomacy existed with Iran was collapsed by what Trump did, of course. Look what it goes on to say. In one of many paradoxes of Iran, Khomeini finds that he has more in common with the younger generation of reactionaries than his own contemporaries. Well, to a degree, that's true. Because the younger generation of what he's calling reactionaries aren't reactionaries. There are people that are given to the cause that is fundamentally predicated upon what they read in Islam, at least in their favor of Islam. It goes on to say this cohort is drawn from traditional classes with their attachment to God and his divine republic. Let's substitute the word for God in Allah. They don't use the term God, they say Allah. There's a big difference between the word God and Allah. Allah is actually a name, and it's a name of the false god that they worship. They were trained at colleges such as Imam Sadiq University, whose curriculum is heavy on religion and light on sciences. They are the foot soldiers of the revolution, manning the security services with the Revolutionary Guards Corps. When I talk about the IRGC, that's who we're talking about. IRGC stands for the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. That's who we're talking about. They have their own political party in the form of the Padiri, which, by the way, this party means the steady party. That's how it translates, right? And their own publications. And Aisi was acceptable to them given his grisly legacy, but they view most of their elders as corrupt relics of the past. They dominate the parliament and are now eyeing the presidency. Among the men that could be acceptable presidents for this cohort would be a former nuclear negotiator, Saeed Yaili, and the current Minister of Roads and Urban Development, Mehrdad Bazfash, which, by the way, let me just tell you something a little bit about Bazfash. That could end up becoming a reality except for one thing. Khomeini probably will never let that happen for a couple of reasons, and we don't have the time to get into those reasons. Look what it goes on to say. Looming over this is Khomeini's stage managing of his own secession. This will not be just about the survival of the republic, but safeguarding its revolutionary identity. Khomeini needs men who will not only go wobbly in the face of international pressure or yield to temptations of commerce with the West. He's going to need somebody who's going to stand more firmly. Very much as Rouhani did. Okay, look at this. He has little choice but to entrust his state to one of the Islamic Republic. That's a typo as well. I know what they're trying to say. It could have been that this was copied out incorrectly, but anyway. Anyway, I think what they're trying to say is that he has little choice but to entrust his state to one of the smallest minorities that still hold to a religious idealism, a religious cause, right? That still believes in Allah, basically. In essence, the Islamic Republic is in the process of being handed over to untested ideologues. I don't agree with that statement, by the way. I do believe that they are tested. As a matter of fact, I believe that they're more serious and more determined than IEC ever was for a lot of different reasons. I think maybe when they say untested, maybe untested in the face of international diplomacy, maybe untested in that way. Foreign policy debates no longer fracture Iran's elite the way they once did. The remarkable success of Iran's so-called axis of resistance is hard to dispute. Iran's conglomeration of proxies and militias have helped defeat America in Iraq and Afghanistan, humbled Saudi Arabia and Yemen, preserved the Assad dynasty in Syria, and traumatized Israel on October 7th. This is imperialism on the cheap. By the way, can I just simply say this? They're right about this. They are right about the fact that Iran's direct hand of influence has actually done everything that they're talking about. And let me focus on one area really quickly. I'm going to mute the microphone here for just 1 second. With that in mind, or they're talking about some of the regimes that they've propped up and some of the people that they've kept, let me get into one very important article, especially as it relates to Raisi dying, right? This is an article in Israel Hayom that actually says Syria's Asma Assad, right, to be isolated due to cancer bout. Folks, this is not a joke. This is not a joke, right? Assad, the wife of Syrian President Bashar Assad, has been diagnosed with leukemia, the presidency said on Tuesday, about 5 years after she announced she had fully recovered from breast cancer. The statement said that Asma, 48, would undergo a special treatment protocol that would require her to isolate and that she would step away from public engagements as a result. In August 2019, Asma said she had fully recovered from breast cancer and said that she had been discovered, that it had been discovered earlier. Since Syria plunged into war in 2011, the British-born former investment broker has taken on the public role of leading charity efforts and leading families of killed soldiers, but has also become hated by the opposition. Okay, Bashar, her husband, by the way, has ruled Syria with an iron fist since taking over from his late father Hafez, which, by the way, if you've ever known some of the things that Hafez did in Syria, it would absolutely make you sick. The British-trained eye doctor initially inspired hopes for reform, but instead brutally crushed dissent after protests erupted in 2011 as part of the Arab Spring uprisings sweeping the region. Okay, so why is this important? I'll tell you why it's important. It's important because where this is going to end up going is it's going to contribute to a level of instability in Syria that will open up significant doors, not only for Iran, but substantially for Russia. Assad, I promise you, is not going to rule the same way that he has been ruling, with what he's actually facing with his wife. And what's going to end up changing even more than that is going to be the approach that is being taken on a much broader scale with how they run things. I'm not going to even use the term politics, with how they run things in Syria. that is going to open up a much more substantial door, one that is a lot of people just can't anticipate or recognize, and it's going to change absolutely everything in the region. And by the way, just so that you know, when we talk about it changing everything in the region, so much of what we're seeing even right now in the current moment has already changed a lot of what we see in the region and what's actually going on. So I want to put all these things together for you guys so that you understand it, so you can see it, you can recognize it, and know what we're dealing with here, right? The remaining issue that Khomeini has to settle before his own passing is the nuclear program. Iran's scientists and technicians have done their job, and there are probably no longer remaining technological barriers to detonation. Khomeini has expanded the nuclear infrastructure in terms of size and sophistication, but has been hesitant about crossing the final line and actually detonating the bomb. As he contemplates his last and most consequential decision, he will increasingly be surrounded by men who feel they have little to lose in the age of American decline in the Middle East. I actually think it's a little bit different than that. I actually think yes, they are sensing American weakness, and so they're looking at an opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity to exploit that weakness. But I think the bigger issue here is where it's actually going to end up going. I think the bigger issue that's in front of us here is the opportunities that they have afforded to them based on the idealism that drives them from what they read in the Quran, and the younger, more brainwashed group continues to take on a different flavor of idealism that is a lot more extreme than anything that they've ever seen. So the idea of the fireworks going off in Iran and celebrations happening, hey, that's good. And there's a lot of people that are doing that. But I can tell you this right now, the type of kickback, fight back that has to happen in order to change a regime, virtually impossible. Now, if Trump was in office and we had a strong and supportive United States of America, then we might be in a completely different ball of wax. Something might be completely different. We might not even be in the same place. It might be completely different, something completely other than what we had ever anticipated. So, an election is coming up very soon. That election, which really, in essence, if you wanna talk about what an election in Iran really is all about, it's Khomeini appointing who he wants as president, and then that person becoming president. That's really what the election is in Iran. That's how it works. Okay? That's kind of how it functions. So that's going to happen. You know, they say it's going to have to happen within the next 50 days. I think it'll happen sooner than that. And I think it'll go without a hitch. I think the foreign minister, it's going to be a very interesting thing to see what happens with the foreign minister. I think that this is going to speed up the diplomacy efforts that have existed between Israel and, of course, Saudi Arabia. Because we know that there does stand a chance for idealism to take over in a way that we've never seen in Iran and create all kinds of havoc that we've not seen yet. Khomeini doesn't have a whole lot to lose, but lots of things are happening. By the way, there's a lot of stories that some of you guys may have not heard that could be contributing to some of the instability that we're actually going to see, right? Like, for example, there was a Jewish businessman who was killed in Egypt. The stories about this are not centered around terrorism. Rather, they're centered around a completely different issue, which is kind of a potentially could be a new thing, right? How about this? How about El Qahira news agency is talking in a positive way about the idea that Gaza and the conflict in Gaza may be over soon? Where are they getting that from? Right? Where are they getting that from? How about this? How about Israel strikes Aleppo? That just happened. Dozens of terrorists killed in that Israel strike. Folks, things around us are changing, and they're changing substantially, and they're changing considerably. So with all the background that I just gave you, and I gave you guys a lot of background. Look, I did a lot of groundwork for you guys to be able to understand a little bit more what's going on. Let me give you some more on the updates happening in Iran, because this is going to mean a lot more to you now, okay? Okay. President's gone. He's dead. There is an interim president in office right now. He, in essence, was sort of like the vice president. Now he's the president, okay? Still very sympathetic towards the cause of Khomeini, still very idealistic in nature. He thinks about things completely differently than a normal, reasonable human being. So he fits the mold pretty well, right? So you've got that. The other thing that you have, and it's really important to understand, is we've lost Abdullahian. With Abdullahian lost, it makes a massive difference. Because as the foreign minister, he himself is an absolute, he's a terrorist. That's exactly what he is. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this for fun. I am going to find the video, which I believe I have. I'm gonna find it, where the ambassador, Israel's ambassador to the UN, actually addresses this. He actually speaks about this issue, and I'm very, very happy of the boldness that I see in this man when he openly and blatantly speaks about these things, because these things are like super, super, super important, right? And if we ignore these things, we end up creating a problem for ourselves that's going to be bigger than anything else, because the United States of America will, in essence, become the next victim, so to speak, of the nonsense that we continue to see. Okay? So this is important. All right, and I want this to be seen. Let me see if I can find this here. I'm going to find this video because I want you to see what the foreign minister actually says here, and I think it's really important. Okay, I'm going to look for it, and as soon as I find it, then I will get it to you guys. Let me see here. Live TV always does this. It's always funny this way. Let me find it here. Oh, it'll be up here somewhere. Yeah, it's going to be right here. Okay. I gotta find this here. Okay, either way, let me see. Is that it? I know I'm stalling when I probably shouldn't be, because I want to show you guys what the foreign minister actually had to say, because it is very important to see what's actually said and what his representatives, what his representation was. I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the speech of the UN's foreign minister speaking here. I thought I actually had it, but apparently it doesn't look like I do have it here. Thought I did, but I don't. Either way, I would very much encourage you guys to go to the video that I did about the UN recently that actually deals with this. Gosh, I thought I actually had it here, and I don't know why I don't seem to have it. Let me see if I can locate it here somehow. Hold on one second. Because they might have it still here. Hold on. Because I would really like to find it and show it to you guys. Let me see. Is it here? No. Okay. I will find that video. Actually, I don't even have to find that video. I would encourage you guys to go to the video that I made where I deal with this specific issue, where I talk about the UN basically seeking to forsake Israel. And in that video, I actually show Abdullahian speaking. And I was actually hoping for you guys to see it. But let's go back to this. So with Abdullahian gone, with the president gone, Iran has a little bit of a vacuum, but that vacuum is not as significant as a lot of people think, only because there is a contingency that's always been in place for dealing with such vacuums. And Khomeini might be a little in trouble in his mind, but it's not going to be as bad as a lot of people think. Now, let me tell you where this does become somewhat consequential and a lot more significant than a lot of people actually think, okay? Hezbollah will undoubtedly become affected by this. I can tell you right now that Nasrallah he has not been vocal about, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, Nasrallah would be the leader of Hezbollah. He has not been all that vocal as of late. He has not been as threatening as he normally is. He's not been as aggressive as he normally is. He's been sort of backing off. He shied away. Even October 7th, he's like, you know what? You guys are on your own right now. There's a time that will support you here. So he already sees the writing on the wall. And I guarantee you the leaders right now of Hezbollah are very concerned, because many of them are IRGC members. There's a lot to be said here, and there's a lot of fear concerning what's going to happen, the consequences of them continuing to do what they do. And so Hezbollah has kind of shied away a little bit. Now they're beginning to attack. They've been attacking from the north. I get that, but not nearly at the level that we anticipate them attacking, because they know what's coming. They understand the situation that they're about to embark upon. So that's very sort of a very important aspect here for us to talk about, right? So we have to be concerned about Hezbollah because Hezbollah is there's a bigger vacuum right now within Hezbollah than there ever has been because of the death of Raisi and because of the death of Abdullahian. Hamas is going to start getting more skimmish than they've ever gotten because in the current moment in which we sit, all financial or fiscal operations that exist between Iran and Hamas are going to cease. And it will be very short-lived, but it is going to cease, which means Hamas will have to rethink its approach and may very well end up getting to the point where they say, we'll give up under these circumstances, and you know how that's going to end up going, right? So then you have the Yemeni Houthis, which, by the way, are almost completely unheard of right now. They're still creating instability in the Red Sea. We know that. We also know that they're continuing to fight Saudi Arabia at levels that we haven't seen before, very unprecedented. And we know that they're seeking to embarrass and interfere with operations that exist within the UAE, within all the Gulf states. My understanding is there may be a few of them that are even in Kuwait right now. There's a lot of nonsense going on. So the death of the president and the foreign minister is going to create enough instability that contributes to the level of disorganization that we'll start seeing in organizations like Hezbollah, in the Yemeni Houthis, in many of these other organizational sort of infrastructures that are financial that rely upon Iran. It will eventually go back to the infrastructure in which it relied upon originally, but that infrastructure might look a little different. So, here are the things you need to look out for. Okay, I'm going to give you a list. When you are considering the issues surrounding what just happened with Raisi, what happened with Abdullahian, I want you to start paying attention to the other front-facing Iranian leaders. And there are many of them. Okay? There are front-facing lawmakers. There are lots of front-facing men that are representing Iran, even in the context of Hezbollah, and even in the context of Hamas, and even in the context of the Yemeni Houthis. I need you to pay very close attention to all of those people that are front-facing positions in Iran, because I think they are going to be your telltales. They're going to be the very things that give you the warning of what is actually happening. When diplomatic efforts come to a complete cease, even with people that Iran is technically diplomatic with, you need to really be watching closely. When you begin to see the people who are front-facing that have a very, very prominent place in the public eye begin to withdraw themselves, people like Khani, then you need to start paying attention. Where are they retreating to? Where are they spending their time? What are they doing in the current moment? You need to ask yourself that. You need to pay attention to countries like Libya. You need to pay attention to Spain, believe it or not. You need to pay attention to what's south of Spain, which is Morocco. There's a lot of other countries that we all need to be paying attention to right now. We certainly need to be paying attention to Turkey. We need to be paying attention to Syria. We need to be paying attention to Jordan. We need to be paying attention to Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, all of the Gulf states, right? Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. We need to look at all of that stuff. Certain places to look at, little cities, Doha, very, very important, right? Another place to be looking at. Why? Because Qatar is at the center of housing some of the most wicked people in the world that are living very luxurious lives, including the leaders of Hamas. So we need to be paying attention. Pay attention to what's happening in Afghanistan. Look at what's going on in Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, Uganda. Uganda specifically. Why? Because Uganda, what Uganda has around it will make a big difference in the geopolitics that drive things to the north. Like, here's a great example. There's a massive water debate that's happening right now, a massive one in Somalia specifically, right? When you start getting into how that extends into countries like Ethiopia and Sudan and Eritrea, understand this for a second. All of those conflicts dramatically affect what you're going to start seeing in Cairo, in Egypt. Libya becomes affected by it. Chad becomes affected by it. Algeria becomes affected by it. All of these countries become affected. So you need to scan the headlines for these countries. Pay attention to what's happening in Lebanon, especially Beirut, especially. Pay attention. Track the actions of what's happening in Athens, in Greece, or in Rome. Track the things that are happening. Any country that is bordering the Mediterranean, you need to be paying attention closely. All of these nations are going to be dramatically affected by Iran. Iraq is one to really pay attention to. Really pay attention to them. Why do you pay attention to them? Because we know what's going to happen with Babylon. So these are the things that we need to look at. And I can promise you that as time goes by, I will begin to make more and more connections for you guys. I hope that what I've been able to do for you right now has been very useful. I want to apologize to you in advance for those of you guys that watch us on locals. We're not going to do locals today because of the time crunch that we're in as a result of the late start that we had. But I will tell you right now, we've got a new James Kaddis app coming. I'm very excited about that. It's coming within the next few months or so. And there are going to be some awesome things that are coming out of there. And for those of you guys that support me on locals, we'll switch you right over if you are interested in that. We're really looking forward to what's happening there. So there you have it, folks. I hope I've given you a good, solid, reasonable foundation for the things that are happening right now. And we will get into more as we find out more. And then keep an eye on the YouTube channel because I am releasing videos on a daily basis that is talking about a lot of this stuff. We're tackling it head on. They all relate. They're all important. They're all a part of the geopolitics, and we need to start taking it all seriously. All right? Okay, with that, folks, let's pray. We'll wrap it up. Father in heaven, we just thank you, Lord, for this time. We thank you for your goodness and your faithfulness, Lord. We thank you for the fact that you are good and that you are God. And thank you for all that you've done, Lord. Help us to keep an eye on the things that are happening. Help us to really be close to the heartbeat, the pulse of what's taking place in the world today, and keep us always looking to you, knowing that you could come at any second. Christ could come at any moment. We love you, Father, and thank you. Go before us, fill us with your spirit now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, you guys, I love you so much. Listen, please do me a favor. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do that right now. It is so important. And hit the notification button because we will notify you and keep you up to speed on what's going on. We love you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. And by the way, remember this. Don't ever forget this. Christ could come at any moment, and do not ever be discouraged because the world that we're living in right now, things are not falling apart. They really, truly are falling into place. And I do emphasize the term falling, right? It is. And God is faithful. He knows exactly what he's doing, okay? Love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight.